Greetings and salutations. This is the Holy Spackle, and I am here today with a special guest, Scott Guertin. And Scott and I think we've hit it off pretty well pretty early on in the Great Debate. So it's kind of nice to have a fellow geek in the house. How you doing, Scott?
I can't complain. It's a Friday night, always a good night.
Yep, it is Friday the 13th. Da-da-da.
Boy, is it.
So how was your Friday the 13th?
So, in my own little microcosm, Friday the 13th was pretty good. As soon as you get outside of my microcosm, apparently things have been pretty bad.
Oh, yeah, I can't, I feel like I can't go on air without saying that, our hearts are with the people of Paris right now, and that, it's sort of heavy news, to hear these things. And so I'd say that was a bad Friday the 13th thing today. But other than that, in my personal life, not too bad, But luckily I'm not superstitious, right? It's just, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
So Scott's working the graphics today because he has skills.
It doesn't take up quite as much room as I'd hoped, but
You
throw it
can,
at the bottom or the top?
wherever you want to put it.
All right, we'll put it at the bottom.
Okay. So, I actually, if you could link it on the side too, that'd be good. But anyway, the news is pretty tragic and awful, and I don't know. I just hope that there's not some crazy fallout from it. That's, insane.
Yeah. Suffice to say, I think people are going to be pretty on edge.
Yeah. So, anyway, so besides that heavy news, let's get back to you. What brought you to the Great Debate community?
Well, I started off. I really got hooked on Armored Skeptic. And I can't even tell you how I found his videos. I was just like cruising YouTube and came across them, and I was like, oh, hey, this guy talks about atheism. This is something that I am, but I've never really gotten too involved in. And so I got to watching those videos, and as related content, I started seeing like Hangout stuff coming out, and I didn't even know that Hangouts on Air was a thing at that point, which tells you how in tune I was. And I saw, I think some of the first stuff I saw was JD Kane's videos. And at the same time, I also started watching the Atheist Experience. It was kind of like a way to have some background noise when I was working. I would just put that on and just listen in. And from the Hangouts and Atheist Experience, from there, I encountered phenomenon such as G-Man and people that he got into debates with, and sort of from there found Nadia's Hangouts, and I guess the rest is basically history. I started going into those Hangouts, and then I started going into other Hangouts, and now I'm kind of looped into a fair amount of it in the Great Debate community.
Now, do you consider yourself somebody that fancies himself as a debater, or do you fancy yourself something else?
I enjoy a good discussion, but I don't think I would ever sign up to be in a formal debate. I feel like I would be doing whatever topic it is something of a disservice. I would say if nothing else, I'd like to consider myself a very good moderator. A lot of times I've been in on-air hangouts and off-air hangouts where I kind of just fell into the position of kind of just coordinating the discussion and trying to keep things on track and trying to keep one person from steamrolling the other when possible. There are some entities in our community that are nigh unstoppable, but So I would say a moderator is probably uh, what I would consider myself more of in the community.
It's funny because I did joke and say that moderates make good moderators. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist moderate or a Christian moderate. Generally, we are almost better as moderators than debaters for some reason. And it's true. I mean, I actually feel like I'm extremely weak at debate, and some people could accuse me as somebody that doesn't want to put their position out there, but I think I've often put my position out there. It's just that I don't think I'm always the most convincing person, and I think there's some sort of charisma and this need to win and this love of like how do I say it? This love of trap lane. If you ever noticed, there's a lot of trap lane involved and playing games and like touche. Like I'm like I just want to talk. And I don't necessarily want to slam dunk and kill shot. I'd rather understand. And I think I've questioned myself, is there a place for a moderate? Is there a place for us that just want to understand or have a conversation, as opposed to, I want to win for Jesus, or I want to win, against, evil religion, or, whatever your position is.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, not that I think anyone is going to go combing around the Hangouts for my performances, but for the most part, when I get into Hangouts and I start going, getting into these discussions with these people who are not really interested in clarifying their position or understanding mine, and when they make that like pretty clear, I you can see at any time in the discussions, I get frustrated, and then eventually it's just kind of I'm done. Like I'm just not interested in a discussion anymore, because it's not really a discussion. It's trying to play word games, and it's trying to like manipulate your counterpart into saying something that's going to make them look stupid or make them look silly. And I don't enjoy that. I also will laugh a lot, particularly when I get into discussions with people who are overly aggressive, which I guess in a debate setting is a fine tactic, but I don't get the reaction that people would want. I don't get angry. I don't get like aggressive. I kind of laugh. It's funny.
Right? I think we do have to laugh to a certain degree. I think actually Renee Skeptic's in chat, and it's funny because she's taught me in the last couple weeks that I need to laugh at some of this because it is sometimes that out there, and it deserves to. For some people it is a game, and some people are serious, and I'm sort of this hybrid of I do think some things are silly, and I do think some things are about sharing and understanding, and some people want to argue, and if that's your tool set, I let it be, but it's not mine. I don't know.
I've actually been told by a couple of the more aggressive members of the community that a few times, like I would be in a hangout with them, and afterwards they'd be like, "Yeah, you don't belong there.
You suck." Get
no,
out.
no,
I'm kidding.
Like you suck. It's that hangout was made for people to come in there and fight, and I wasn't there to do that. I was there to try to have a discussion, and I kind of cramped their style. I mean, a mutual friend of ours has often said that I'm too nice to people, and I can get in the way of the stormtroopers, as they would put it.
Yeah. It is hard. It's hard not to do that, right? Because there is part of me, I don't necessarily want world peace, but there's part of me that fights for, hey guys, you're getting too mean. Let's talk it out. Let's, and usually what happens is, well, at least for me, is you get verbally punched in the nose for that. So now I've kind of tried to like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Support Your Local Sheriff, but I'm going to make the weirdest visual. Yeah, James Garner, Support Your Local Sheriff. It's one of my favorite comedies. He's like this sheriff that becomes sheriff because nobody wants to be sheriff because sheriffs die. And this fight breaks out, and he's trying to eat, and he just picks up this plate and just moves on over and tells people to hold it. And that's what I feel like I'm doing. I'm like picking up my plate, people throwing food, they're fighting. I'm just like, hold it. Let me just pick up my plate and move off to the side. Go on, carry on.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand what you mean. I'm trying to work on that. I have a hard time disengaging from a discussion, particularly when the person is really like going at me. And I mean, a lot of that can be chalked up to pride. Just I don't want to give in. I don't want to like admit defeat, and I realize that that's ridiculous. And I realize that now when I'm not in a heated discussion with someone, but at that moment, I'm not so good at realizing that. So that's something I'm working on. Yeah, I never feel any satisfaction after some like heated argument because it never like it always ends with like someone I don't know. It's like having someone storms off is usually how those end. And for me like I actually get like chills when a discussion moves in a direction where like people like maybe walk away with an understanding of each other. Like I'm not one of the people who's looking to like come into these discussions and convert people to atheism or debunk any particular brand of theism. I just I want to chat with people and hopefully I don't know make some sense of things and I would say actually if I were to point to a group that I tend to engage more aggressively, I'm more aggressive towards like the anti-science crowd. In fact, the only reason I've ever gotten blocked is for going after people for spouting non-science
I saw
stuff.
that, right? You've even been blocked by theists that aren't Christian over, we won't name names, but over science things. And
Yeah, I've been blocked by a few, and I also I think when you see my comments in those sort of threads, I think I come off more aggressive than I do in person. And it's made me also reconsider like really going at it in the comment threads because I also realize that I tend to not. The virtue of charity is dead.
You don't sugarcoat in the comments.
No, I don't.
And nobody can tell. That's the problem with comments or Facebook messages or texting. Nobody knows your tone of voice, so they could assign some sort of snark that maybe you didn't have, or all sorts of things.
I tend to say things with a smile, even if the comments sound frustrated. I'm usually not like sitting there like, ugh. It's usually just, like no, that's not right. But and I've realized like it just in the comment thread, the virtue of charity is almost dead. People tend to almost intentionally look for like the least charitable interpretation of whatever you're saying.
Right? It's very frustrating, and it's on both sides. Like I actually see it on both sides of the fence on that one. It's just and I think it's like you just have no control over people's filters, right? So like you don't know if people are associating what you just said with what that other guy just said about the same subject, or you know what I mean? It's rough.
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I like for example, even just today, someone put up a riddle, and I get frustrated with riddles because I have like the exact opposite type of brain for solving riddles. And so I kind of made a comment in there, like I knew the answer because I'd heard the riddle before. So I made a comment like, yeah, I know the answer, but man, I hate riddles. Like they just frustrate me to no end because it's just playing with obscure language. And I had one guy like jump down my throat like, well, because you're offended by riddles, people should stop posting them. And it's like, what? No. Just gave my opinion. He's like, well, what was the entertainment value of you making that comment? And it's like, first of all, I do what I want. Second of all, I'm not here to entertain anybody. I mean, I hope people are entertained sometimes, but I don't feel obligated to be entertaining in what I comment on things. And he backed off.
So you actually mentioned, well, a couple things that I really think are really important that I think are lacking. One is charity. And, I mean, I hate to bring up old drama, but I'm gonna bring up old drama. When Dragnot was talking about how morals are subject to change, and he used Sparta as an example, and how young wives were taken, at like age 13 and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then they ran with it and said, see, drags promotes pedophilia.
Yes,
and I'm like,
actually, I do remember that.
that is the most uncharitable thing, especially considering a lot of people who are scholars think that Mary might have been 13. like it's just the most horrifying. Why don't we just say, thank God we don't live in the Bronze Age. We've gotten better. We progressed. It's just. Again, I think that was a lesson in charity, and how some people are willing to be uncharitable just to prove a point that might be bad. I don't know. And do you think it's just some sort of lost art, or do you think it's just intentional and people are just like, we don't need it?
Well, I think part of the problem is this community tends to. I mean, I don't know. I've seen a fair amount of this community, and certainly myself realized that I kind of fall victim to it. Is that like if you don't step back and take a breath now and then, like it's so easy to get so entrenched in your lines, and people do draw lines, and I think it's easy to let the when you're so entrenched in an us and them mentality, it's almost like a reflexive rhetoric style to just screw charity. I am going to try to make this person look as bad as possible. And really, where the best example of what I've seen the virtue of charity is a YouTube channel, Philosophy Tube. If you go into the comment section of any of his videos, the guy has an absolute gift for always interpreting a comment in the most positive way, even if the person, like, I look at the comments and say, I think that person might be trolling, and the way he engages the comment, he takes it in the best possible light, and always engages that person in like a friendly discussion. And apparently, to his credit, YouTube has contacted him and asked, like, how are your comment threads so friendly? And I think it's an example that's worth that bears repeating, because I think that our community as a whole would be a lot better off if we didn't always assume that the other person was a shitlord.
Yeah, I think that assumption first makes it really hard to ever really have a real discussion, right? So.
And it looks like we're having some fun in the comments.
Yeah. Yeah, if you decide to troll live chat, what usually ends up doing is I end up kicking you and having you timeouts over and over and over again, so you can't type, and that's really frustrating. So I'd say choose how you comment carefully. If you are attacking another person in the comment section excessively, and it's not like one or two times, you're gonna end up in timeout. So anyway.
I swear I've seen the name before, but I don't actually know who Phantom Prophet is. But apparently he's seen me in other videos. So
yeah, Phantom. I almost describe him as Gnostic, but yeah, he's from Nadia's room. That's when we met, at least. Yeah, and then not that
okay, so yeah, you would have seen me in there a few times.
Yeah, not that he's only there, but that's where I first met him. That's where we first met. That's where a lot of us
That's
ended
true.
up in the beginning, is in Nadia's.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that initially, Deidre, like you and I got into it a couple of times, not like heated arguments, but definitely started off very much kind of disagreeing with each other.
Yeah, we've had some ping pong matches back and forth. They're buried in 8 hours of Nadia hangouts somewhere.
Yeah, it's hard to like comb back through that. Like it's like, oh, like I kind of wish like I was smarter about it and like would like time mark where I went in. So if I wanted to play back a conversation later, because it's like I get like, I get up the next day and it's like, boy, what were they saying the other day? And I'm like, I don't feel like combing through 24 hours worth of video footage to try to find that 30-minute portion in which I wanted to recall 5 minutes of the discussion.
Yeah, it's a lot to go through. It's like, I like to call it sifting for gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every so often you'll have these golden moments of like a great conversation, or somebody's really challenged you in a really good way, and you've sort of sifted for gold, but it's a lot to sift through around here, like an awful lot.
Yeah, no kidding. I certainly, certainly the one thing I will say I appreciate from being in the community this long is that prior to joining this community, I knew almost nothing about philosophy. And it actually is a terribly interesting topic, and I've actually really enjoyed learning more about it. And it has helped a great deal in discussions, particularly when Max and I have a disagreement about something. I don't find myself getting buried in terminology the way he would normally do when we're having a discussion centered around philosophy.
Yeah, usually what's good about Max is if you ask him, "Hey, you're losing me in the jargon. Can you reword?" He will do it. You just have to know to ask instead of, you know, kind of going along if you don't, or I don't know, because the use of words and stuff sometimes shifts from person to person, and I don't know.
Oh, that you've just hit on probably one of my biggest pet peeves in discussion is when people try to play word police. And by word police, they will attempt to, I will say, for example, I don't like indoctrination. What I've had literally done to me is that someone brought up some other definition of indoctrination, which I wasn't meaning when I used the term, and used that definition to say, see, indoctrination is not bad. And it's like, well, no, that's not what I meant by indoctrinate. Like, you haven't proven anything. You've just played like word police. If the only thing you've gotten out of this is you can argue that I've misspoken, but it's like one of those, what it's like you're not having a discussion here. You're just trying to derail the discussion, and that stuff tends to go right through me.
But I won. Then that's what's important, right?
Yes. Yes, people do have this like, I'm gonna win this discussion, and it's always just one of those like, you haven't won. I actually probably hate you a little bit right now because you've just made the conversation frustrating.
And I think we talked about that, when we're talking about we were talking about the comment threads and having to have the last word, and how it kind of does sting your ego to just back away sometimes. But you're just like, you know what? I've said my piece, and I don't have to win the comment thread by having the last word. You don't have to win the comment thread, and I've learned that, like, it's I'll say my piece, and then if people want to tell me to F off or whatever they want to do, it's it's okay, like and I think that's sort of not cowardice, but trying to put down your ego, going, that ego that's stinging, that wants to win, that sometimes will kick in. Even for me as a moderate, it'll kick in sometimes where I want to be understood. I want to be, at least understand. I can explain. I have this I can explain problem. Let me explain. And to put that aside, sometimes is the healthier thing to do. Tom, you're going on timeout. I'm sorry, but this is about Scott, so anyway. Here's the rule of comment threads. We're here for our guest, so anytime you decide to take the comment thread and hijack it, please don't. me. Well, another person that did that was Mark Thomas, so anyway.
Yes, he did.
So anyway, moving on. So putting aside your ego for the sake of, I don't know, your sanity.
Yeah. And it's, I think probably the most awkward moments for me in comment threads where like I've definitely just been like, I'm just gonna go, is when I've gotten into discussions with young Earth creationists, so probably as far away from me as possible in terms of like what we think. And a couple of times I've had it turn into where they've gone full out preacher mode. And when you outright start preaching to me about like, all of this science stuff will just, they're just guessing. You just have to believe and know it in your heart. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna go because there's nothing for me here anymore. This isn't a discussion. This is just awkward.
Yeah, there's a point where it needs to be a two-way street, and I think I've said that to other Christians where, yeah, I'm Captain Christian Living, and I would much rather discuss what is God and who is God than if there's a God, and so that already puts me in a bad place in this debate community, but so that is sort of on a preacher side, I suppose, because I like I said, I'm Captain Christian Living. If this is right, then how do we live? Is more of my better. My strength in that way, but I would say that there is this point where you have to say, if you're just opening up your Bible and just preaching at people or telling people what they're doing wrong, that isn't really a discussion. That's just you soapboxing, right?
Pretty much. And it is, I suppose, if all you're looking to do is to get me to like leave the thread, I mean, I guess it's an effective tactic then. I don't feel defeated. I just is like, I mean, as anyone who has watched me in a lot of the Naughtiest hangouts, whenever it comes to like people's religious beliefs, I'm just, I have no desire to disabuse anyone of their beliefs because who the hell am I? I think the question when I was first getting in there, one of the questions I always threw out there, and I got the same answer every time, and it sort of proved my point, is like, was your belief cemented by some personal experience? And they all say yes. And it's like, well, then I've got nothing to say to that. I mean, if that's your personal experience, then okay. And I haven't had that, so don't try to push it on me. And that's kind of, where I stand. Like, I don't worry so much about what people believe. I only worry about the things that they try to legislate on other people. I care what people do to other people. If you want to believe something, great, but that's on you. Don't make it on other people.
Yeah, I'm similar in that way. I think that, well, I think two things. I think that religion can corrupt government in a sense, because you imagine, like, religion kind of will have ebb and flows in population, right? So right now in America, I would still say that Christianity is pretty strong, but imagine if something happens and now Islam's really strong. You know how many people would flip out if Islam had more hands on the government, and said, hey, we're gonna say this prayer in front of this public meeting, and
we'll all lay down our mats and face east.
Yeah, no big deal, and everybody would flip out. And so I always take this kind of, I don't know, this stance of that it is better to keep it as separated as possible and kind of decide to make laws on what we all can agree on, as best as possible, at least on basic things. But I guess that would be a little more libertarian in some ways. And then I have this other reverse idea that I think that government corrupts religion. And this is where a lot of atheists get mad at me. But but I think that the government, the worst thing that happened to Christianity in a lot of ways was government backed. And so Christianity's grim history is connected when Christianity is, the nation's religion. So
it's actually interesting because some have also put forward that the reason that Christianity is not such a big deal in Europe, like particularly like in the UK, is because it's the state religion. Like it eliminated that competition that we have in the States.
Oh yeah, if you actually look at Czechoslovakia. Or not Czechoslovakia. I always slip and do that, and then people from the UK go, "Oh my gosh, knowing geography." The Czech Republic. If you look at the Czech Republic, that is the case. They have a state religion, and it's largely dead.
I think I've seen advertisements that were from Finland, where it's the same thing. They had a state church, and apparently what was happening in Finland is that people discovered that there is a loophole where you can opt out of paying the tithe, or in this case, it was really a state level tax, and there was a way to opt out if you claimed to be non-religious. And once people discovered this, a lot of them started to take advantage, and so the state church actually started putting up advertisements, and I think it's Catholicism, but I'll tell you, it's a totally different mentality about how they're looking to present themselves over there. Like it's
more private.
Jesus will be there to will be with you when you're throwing up after a night of drinking. Like,
well,
you ever see Dogma?
Hold my hair, Jesus. As I throw up.
They almost are presenting like the Buddy Christ.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think Buddy Christ is a problem here in America. I think, he walks with me and he talks with me, he tells me he's my friend, is kind of this weird thing that goes on, mixed with, which I get accused of, which is funny because I'm really not like that, mixed with this other side, which is fire and brimstone, God's throwing bolts and smiting bitches.
Yeah, you see, I'd be okay with the Buddy Christ persona if they were going with sort of the Buddy Christ politics, which is, more accepting and living something resembling the modern era. But no, they like to mix it with like, a early 1900s mentality of morality. Oh, borderline puritanical.
Yeah, it's very confusing. It's schizophrenic almost. It's like Jesus loves you, but he doesn't love you. Yeah. So you went to a Catholic church growing up, right? Or not a Catholic church. I slipped and said church. A Catholic school.
Both are true.
What?
I grew up going to Catholic church every Sunday. My family was every Sunday.
So did you buy into Catholicism as a kid, or were you a skeptic as a little kid?
I mean, skeptic is kind of a strong term, but I remember growing up, my brother actually went to my parents one time and said, like, I need to go to confession. And so they were like, oh, okay, we're going to bring you. And I remember for myself, like, I remember just always kind of like, I was bored in church. I would sit there, and I mean, the upside of Catholic churches is, man, the architecture is something worth looking at. So I pretty much would spend, when I was a kid, I spent my time kind of looking at the stained glass and seeing what's up there. And I thought that was pretty neat. And as I got older, like, I remember like asking my parents one time, like, why do they put the water in with the wine? What's that about? And they said, well, you should ask the priest. And I was like, oh, okay. So I thought, well, there must be some symbolism to that. And I mean, I'm not kidding when I say I couldn't have been older than 10. And I was thinking, there's got to be some symbolic meaning there. And I went to the priest, like, oh, it dilutes the wine. And I was just like, really? That's why you do it? And I don't know, it just never seemed real to me. It was just kind of something that we did every Sunday. And I had to go and learn more about it. Once I started going to Catholic school, it became just a part of the curriculum. Before Catholic school, for like the first, like kindergarten and first grade, it was just catechism once a week.
Did you go through confirmation?
Yes, I went right up through. Not out of any sense of obligation to the church, more of a sense of obligation to my parents. As hard as this may seem to believe, I was a pretty well-behaved kid. I went to, I went right up through confirmation because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And at the time, it didn't really mean much to me. And so I was like, okay, yeah, sure. It was kind of what you did. And I mean, it didn't help that I was going to Catholic school the whole time. So it was me and virtually all of my peers, except for a few exceptions, one of whom was a Lutheran. So he was kind of had his own deal. And, oh boy. And one was a Lutheran. And then I think I knew a couple of people back in high school who were atheists. They didn't make a big deal about it, though. And the school, for their part, never really made a big deal about it either. Because it wasn't like, we didn't talk about like the hot button politic type topics. And when it came to Catholicism and like what they taught in the classes, they were really taught as academic classes. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
first year was kind of a history of Catholicism and sort of the traditions of Catholicism. The second year was really an academic dive into scripture and how to extrapolate out from scripture in the way that Catholicism sees as being the appropriate way, which of course plenty of people out here disagree with. Junior year we did Christian morality, which is pretty much what you like. It really was an academic dive into morality from a Christian perspective and how they see it, and it was really just like not very controversial. And then my senior year, you get options, and I picked peer ministry. So we would go to the freshman year classes and do little sessions with them, and then we would also have like discussions in our classroom. And I remember my senior year was when gay marriage had kind of become another hot button topic. So that's what, 2004, 2003, 2004. And I
You're
remember,
young.
I know. And I remember at the time, like some of the people in my class started going on about like, you know, it's one man and one woman and blah, 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 blah. And I remember being like sitting in our class and saying like, I literally started turning to the people around me. I'm like, if gay couples could get married tomorrow, does your life change? And they all had to concede no. And I'm like, then why do you care? Why is it a problem? And they tried to argue like, you know, one man, one woman. And I'm like, so what? Just because it's the way things are doesn't mean it's the way things should be. But
I could argue, you know, monogamy and marriage, but we're not going door to door going, hey, I see that you're living in sin because you are living with somebody that you're not married to. Let me pull you out into the streets and shame you. We're not doing that to heterosexuals anymore. You know, we've long stopped that. And so I
no more
just think,
scarlet letters.
yeah, these scarlet letters that we pass out, well, if you're going to pass it out for one sin, then pass it out for all. I think that was the point I was getting at with G-Man. G-Man recently said, Fiona, give me your stance on gay marriage. If your stance isn't what I like, you're not a real Christian. Well, how about this? Let's knock out on everybody's door and figure out what sins they might be committing and then, you know, assign them their scarlet letter. And that proves by me assigning a scarlet letter to somebody, I'm a real Christian, you know? And I think that's what happens is this. You are living
red letter parade.
There's a red letter parade. There's this. You are living a life that is a minority, honestly, like a 10% minority. And at least I'm not like that. That's what I think that goes on. Is I think that there's plenty of heterosexual sin in the Catholic Church, plenty of heterosexual sin in the evangelical church, and there's this game of at least I'm not gay going on. That's really how I see it.
No, I agree. I think that's definitely kind of a thing. I don't know. Like it was weird. Like my parents never had a problem with gay marriage. Like as of course I say they're staunch Catholics, but they weren't staunch Catholics. Like they were staunchly religious, and Catholicism is what they grew up with, and it's what they stick with. But like, I mean, I know that there's quite a few things that they don't agree with about the Catholic Church and what it believes.
I can't tell you how many Catholics don't follow the rules about birth control. Like,
yep.
Every Catholic I know doesn't follow those rules.
Like, I mean, my parents kind of had their own belief set, and Catholicism mostly meshed with it, but they're not like hardline about it. I think the only time that we actually like came to a disagreement is when I started coming home from college, and I would bring my now wife, but at the time girlfriend, home with me, and as far as I'm concerned, she was staying in my room with me. And one time, like my dad kind of got mad at me about it, and I kind of just shrugged at him, and it's like, I don't really care about that. Like I don't care if someone might think it's inappropriate. This is the person that I am with and want to be with, so it's what I'm gonna do. But that was always something that my parents realized is as well behaved as I was absolutely going to be, I was going to do what I wanted to do, and no one was going to make me do otherwise.
Sherry's like, I wandered into the words, at least I'm not gay. It's you. it's a saying that I say when people bash on gay people from the Christian perspective, in particular. Like, it's the one sin that sends you to hell, right? And it's the one thing, you know, that you just makes you extra bad. That, I mean, that's the message I got growing up. Was like, it was like next to murder and child molestation was homosexuality. It was like those three. And I think it's funny because those same people all didn't wait till marriage. They all had sex outside of marriage. You know, like it's the hypocrisy is always makes me giggle of the purity culture that doesn't really exist. And so I guess for me it drives me up the wall. And so the message that I got loud and clear from the purity culture was, at least I'm not gay. You know?
Yeah, no, that and I think there is that. I don't know, like I remember growing up, like homosexuality wasn't even like a thing I had really heard of until I was just about to start high school. Like, that's how much of like a non-topic it was up until that point. And I remember like the first awkward moment of me kind of figuring things out and learning about other people was my brother had a bunch of friends from high school over, and one of the girls there made a comment of, well, I'd rather make out with that girl than a guy than you know, the guy. Like, they were talking about some couple. And I made some offhand comment, naive kid, like, well, I would hope not. And the girl whips around, looks at me, and says, I'm bisexual, you moron. And I was just like, oh.
Is that a thing?
And apparently my brother, who had dated her...
Someone needs to tell Bunto that it's a thing, by the way.
And my brother, who had dated this girl, apparently had he hadn't known this. So he kind of also had this awkward moment of like, oh, I see. And so, like, that was my first, like, kind of brushing with it. And when I got into high school, I was kind of weirded out by it, but not like in like the ew kind of way, just in like I don't understand this kind of way. So like when I was around people who were, I just didn't know how to act. And it wasn't really until I hit like college age that I kind of had figured out like, oh, you just act normal. Actually, in particular, even before college, it was when my dad started doing theater, because first cast party at the house, it was probably of the male portion of the party goers. It was probably
theater for 80, some reason. Yeah, theater for some reason. Thespians often are lesbians. I don't know what it is, but theater is one of those places. It's just
a lot of gay men, a lot of lesbians. I would say more gay men than lesbians even. It's.
I just wanted to rhyme. I just wanted to rhyme. No other reason.
I mean, it's a stereotype, but I mean, it's not unjustified from my own experiences in theater. And then I did theater myself in my junior and senior year of high school. I did musical theater, and most people wouldn't guess that about me.
I was in Brigadoon. What's up? How you doing?
The first musical I was in was actually our high school did Les Mis, so that was pretty cool. And I was super pumped. And then the next year we did The Wiz. That was also a lot of fun, but a very different kind of show. But yeah, I guess part of the reason I was confused is that my own upbringing, in my understanding, like, you know, homosexuality in the Bible is so like lightly covered. Like, I mean, it's mentioned in Leviticus.
5 verses. There's 5 verses.
Yeah, 5 verses.
But there's also 26 verses about slander. I mean, just to give you a comparison.
And I believe divorce is rather vehemently talked about. I mean, I remember my grandmother, from the time I was born, had been remarried. Even before I was born, had been remarried. And her husband went to church every week, but did not go out for communion. Because they, you know, it was not recognized by the church. And I think it wasn't until the priest at the church, when they were in retirement age, when a priest was finally like, why don't you two ever come up for communion? And they said, well, you know, we're remarried. He's like, how long have you been remarried? And I mean, at that point, it had been something like 30 or 35 years. And he's like, I think we can do something about this. And he actually got their previous marriage annulled, I believe is the proper term. And like that's, so like divorce I knew growing up was a big deal theologically, but like homosexuality until that class my senior year of high school, I didn't realize that Catholicism or Christianity as a whole even had anything to say on the topic. But hey, the things you learn. And I was going to Catholic school for 10 years. And that's how much the topic was covered.
Yeah, it's just not that common. So Lay says, "Hey Scott, top 3 video games of the past 5 years. What are your favorite video games?" So Scott's an avid gamer, if you haven't noticed on Hangouts.
Oh goodness, top 3 games from the last 5 years. Hold on, I think I have to check the release date on a game because I think it's going to come close. Okay, that's an easy one then. Skyrim certainly jumps to mind. I don't think I would be being honest with myself if I didn't give Skyrim one of them, because I have put more hours into that freaking game than probably any other game I own. Mass Effect 2, which is another game that I have poured more hours into than I really like to even admit. And do I have another? Let's see. What would my third be?
Assassin's Creed suggests Spoiled Pissed?
No. Assassin's Creed bored me to tears. I think I will give my third spot to Shadows of Mordor for actually taking the sandbox genre and doing something new with it.
I still haven't played that. We have that game on PS4, and I haven't played it yet. Still, Scott's played it. Not you, Scott, but my Scott. Well, I always have to differentiate when I say Scott. They're like, which Scott? Oh my gosh, there's so many Scotts. Yeah, I watched him play it. It looks cool. It looks sick.
Yeah, it's so as one reviewer put it, it out Assassin's Creed, like stealth killing is way more of like a thing in the game. Whereas Assassin's Creed, despite being billed as that, just doesn't really focus on it that much. It really just it took the Batman Arkham Asylum, Arkham City combat engine and just made it probably 300 times more violent. I mean, you actually have something called a brutalized kill in that game, but probably the most notable thing is it was a sandbox game, but it had it had this nemesis system. And the nemesis system kind of like gave me a reason to be like messing around in the sandbox, even if I wasn't chasing the main storyline. Like the problem I run into with games like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption is that I just want to chase the main storyline for the most part. And I didn't want to do in Shadows of Mordor. I spent so much time just like, I'm going to make my army and I'm going to go and wreck his army. And it's just a fun game. Yeah, I agree. Yes, Dishonored did do stealth killing way better, but that's all Dishonored did. Dishonored was not a sandbox game. I'm looking forward to that sequel.
A game that I was disappointed in. What are your games you're disappointed in? For me, Thief was disappointing.
The new one? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Thief Gold and Thief 2 The Metal Age. And unfortunately, I just don't think developers are willing to put in the amount of work it would take to sort of succeed those games, because the thing about those games was the maps were just massive and non-linear. They just put objectives onto the map and you've got to accomplish them. And obviously there were like, intended ways to go about it, things to find, keys to get in through certain doors that you couldn't pick. But it was definitely, I mean, it was those games were really kind of in a league all their own, and companies now are looking to do like these kind of like tightly scripted, heavily narrative driven linear type games, and the Thief genre doesn't do well with that.
COD, that's a big one. That's a big one. I like COD, but I don't play it often.
Okay, so I don't do multiplayer. So Call of Duty games for me are very short.
You're a bad team player, huh? Not that there's really, I don't know. The teams in CODs usually suck.
Yeah, I'm not good at the multiplayer, mostly from a lack of trying. But I don't know. Like I'm for games like that, I'm like a shooter. I really like a good story, and Modern Warfare, the Modern Warfare trilogy of Call of Duty did that quite well. I very much enjoyed the story of those games, but unfortunately, when you put it all together, you probably have like one commercial game's worth of story spread across 3 games.
Yeah, you and I both game, but I think I leaned more MMO. Well, at first I was an Xbox player, right? And so like I was addicted to Halo. I was actually pretty good at Halo, and then I moved from that to when I getting more into WoW. I was like more of a casual player, and then I think Wrath was when I started to actually get seriously into raiding, and I liked
same.
You know what hooked me for WoW is the teamwork.
Yes, I actually, I mean, really, the game that gets the most of my time right now is Final Fantasy 14, which is an MMO. And between that and Guild Wars 2, like those are probably my 2 big time sinks. And I play a little bit of Destiny, which is also an MMO, but not really. It's more of a shooter.
Yeah, it's a weird hybrid. So I'm a little different when it comes to shooters, though. I just like to kill. I mean, I don't really care about the story. I just want to I just want to kill bitches. Like I suddenly become a monster, and so I know, right? Like I'm the opposite of you. Like you were like, I want a story with a shooter, and now with a shooter, I want to shoot. Like I'm horrible.
I don't know. I mean, like I love the Fear series, as much as the sequels didn't necessarily live up to the original. I enjoyed them all, and I mean, I like that good combination of story and action. But really, the best shooters are the ones where the story is being told in the action. Actually, God, I can't say it makes my top 3, but special mention has to go to Spec Ops: The Line. And that game, Lee, the expansion has made it quite it's added quite a bit to that game if you were ever looking to go back. Big changes. But Spec Ops: The Line absolutely deserves sort of an honorable mention, because while the gameplay itself was functional, it could get tedious at times, and I would never say that it was truly fun. But the story had me absolutely gripped. That game was 8 hours of a storyline that just fucking punched you in the gut. Oh, Tom, why are you so angry?
I don't know. I mean, Tom usually can be reasonable, but he's got something against Renee, and Tom, man, I'm putting you on timeout because you're making it all about you. Ask some questions with Scott. Participate in the chat, pay attention instead of fighting with people randomly. Anyway.
But yeah, so special mention to Spec Ops: The Line for having a storyline that absolutely was a sucker punch and had me gripped beginning to end.
So you're also a programmer, right? Like,
I trade, yes.
Is it boring stuff? Or is it cool stuff?
Oh, no. It is terribly boring. If you're not interested in programming, my job would bore you to death. I developed for a platform that handles like order management, warehousing for like companies that do a lot of like fulfillment type work. So like signage at stores.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of the companies that we provide a platform for create signage for stores. So like they need a system to handle orders for those stores that need signage and customizations and what have you. So I think at this point, almost everyone who's listening is probably glazed over.
Yeah. So okay, so you're a programmer by day, but what are your passion? Obviously, we hit on gaming, but what are you really passionate about?
Well, if I had to, if I'm not playing a video game or reading up on up and coming technology for programming, I am probably my next the most defining thing that I do is martial arts. It absolutely is a fundamental aspect of my life, and a lot of the things that I will do and force myself to do are in service to that.
So do you think that like it's been well? I've heard that martial arts can be very mentally beneficial. How is that worked out for you in that way?
Oh, it is probably the best therapy money can buy for me. When I have a stressful day, if I go to class, like exercising at the gym doesn't take my mind away from the day the way having to work through a kata and having to practice a self-defense series or having to teach someone else a self-defense series or a kata. Like it engages me on a mental level to the point where like I cannot be distracted by the things that happened earlier that day. And I got a question here from Lee. If you want me to field that one.
Yeah, go ahead. Read it out because
sometimes... What genre of games do you dislike / believe are overdone? I'm actually, as much as I love the survival horror genre, I would say the jump scare survival horror, the jump scare horror genre, has run its course, and I'm tired of seeing more and more Slenderman, more and more like the Slenderman clones and Five Nights at Freddy's 5. That I like a good survival horror genre, but it needs some subtlety. And so I would say that's probably the genre that I think needs to fuck off and die. And honestly, they're probably more modern military shooters than we really need. Unless they can bring something new to the table, I don't see that space needing more of them.
I think I attract cult leaders. Like Rob Beasley. You know?
Oh boy.
Mark Thomas. You know? And sorry, Tom, but you're kind of getting on that list for me. Calm down. I have this weirdo thing. You know, this is a problem, actually. When I worked at Starbucks, I would actually have this pervert that would grab my hands when I handed him money and try to, like, rub my hands. Like, I attract the weirdest people.
I don't know. I met a guy who, when you shook his hand, he'd do this. He'd roll in and, like, drag his finger along, like, the underside of your wrist. Yeah.
That would weird me out so much. I started throwing money at that customer. I was like, here you go. Like, back at you. You know, wham. One thing that you could do is stop broadcasting the chat, I guess, since it seems like he's really bent on trying to have a voice. But I could just keep giving him timeouts too. But it just...
Yeah, I can unbroadcast the chat and just go back to the regular stream I do.
No, you know what? Leave it up. Leave it up.
Sure.
Actually, I'll just Tom, I'm going to ask you to just kind of, you know, either participate in the conversation or leave. One of the two. So okay, so gaming. I wanted to kind of go back to the scare things. Those jump scare games freak me out. actually, like, I can watch horror movies and I kind of have this separation between reality and the horror. And so, like, I don't really enjoy gore porn, like Hostel or something like that. But even every so often something will get to me, but The Ring or something like that doesn't really scare me too much. There was a couple visuals in it that freaked me out a little bit, but overall, like, horror doesn't freak me out too much because I have this sort of wall usually I can put up. Like, this isn't real. But when I play a video game in horror genre, it tricks my senses into saying this is first person. Mm-hmm. And I've thrown my remote across the room, just chucked it, and, like, like the thing popped out, and, like, wham, because I'm like, like it's just dangerous for me to play that. So I just figured out that's just not my genre.
Yeah, I for survival horror style games, the best one I've played probably in recent times was Alien Isolation. And that's probably the style that, like, Alien Isolation. What makes a good horror game is to build tension, and whatever is after you has to be something that is either scary to look at or the concept is scary. Like, probably one of the scariest moments in Alien Isolation is you have a like a wrench, basically, that you mostly it's a puzzle solving tool, but, like, you can sneak up on for example looters that are on the space station and knock them out with it. But there are these, like, robots who are supposed to be, like, kind of the maintenance staff, but they've gone rogue for whatever reason. And one of them backed me into a corner, and I swung the wrench at it, and it actually grabbed my character's arm and said, "My turn," and punched me in the face a few times, and then slammed me in the head and sent me skittering backwards. And that's when I was like, okay, no, I can't fight these guys. And that sense of disempowerment is probably one of the scarier things you can throw at me in a game. Games like Slenderman, like, they're entertaining at first, but after a while I'm like, okay, I am literally now waiting to be scared. And that's and so, like, I really enjoy that genre when it's done well. Sometimes it's done a little too well, and I actually have to, like, step away from the game.
Going back to martial arts, I've actually thought of taking Krav Maga, because there's a group, and they train on the beach, which is really awesome too. So it's like it's a win-win, like learn Krav Maga on the beach, and I thought that'd be pretty awesome. Though I think I was like, oh, I better wait till I have good medical insurance in case I break a nose or something.
And I mean, that's what that comes down to is making sure that as you gotta feel out, like, your instructor and things like that. I would say probably more important than specific styles, though. Obviously you can start a holy war as to which style is superior, and I'm not interested in going into that, because it's like politics or religion. People just tend to disagree, and it's hard to really cover any ground on it. I would say if you have an instructor with whom safety is not a priority, then that's not an instructor worth training with.
But you took it, I think, a knee to the nose.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, okay, so accidents do happen.
That's what I mean. Like there's that chance, and then it's like, you better make sure you're insured. Pretty much.
Yeah, it is a good idea to have some health insurance on hand in case an injury occurs. And I mean, really, any physical discipline that is going to get you moving comes with some risk tied to it.
Yeah, so I used to be a ropes course instructor, which is my badass card, right? That and rock climbing, we take people to Joshua Tree and stuff like that. And I haven't done it in a year, and full disclosure, and some of that's because of physical issues, but I miss it because I actually have a fear of heights, and and it was always like, but I have a manageable fear of heights, right? But you know what I missed about it? I missed that you were always challenging people to kind of get over their fears. And the people that I was always most proud of were the people that were too terrified to go through the elements. Like they were, but they made it somehow, because it was such a victory for them. I don't know. I wonder sometimes if martial arts has that effect, kind of this, the victory of, I don't know.
It's, I guess, so things that have changed about me since I started doing martial arts that I didn't used to before. I like getting hit. Like when I'm training with someone, I will encourage them. I will encourage them to hit harder because it's a rush. It's this challenge, something that I'll have to.
So everybody, Scott said, beat me.
Hey, I've said before, I'm a tank. I'm also, as much as I've had people who try to, like, I don't know, try to, like, hurt my feelings, will make comments about how apparently I don't look particularly manly. I'm built to take a beating. My instructor has outright said when he has to demo something that's going to involve like hitting the other person a lot, I'm the go-to because he knows he can hit me pretty much as he needs to, and as demo it as many times as he needs to, and I can take it. Like whether it's physical or social, I'm a tank. I'm able to take a beating.
So we're gonna try this right now. Everybody hit Scott with words. I'm just kidding. No, don't do that.
I don't know how that would work.
So I was, we're on other social media, functions, and I was creeping on your pictures, and I saw that you did Tough Mudder.
Yeah, I did that a few times.
So okay, so that's a big obstacle course, that I think is extremely challenging looking. And how long did it take you to train for that?
It was let me see. The first time I did it, we came up with the idea. We came up with the idea to do it around November, and it was in July. So we pretty much started training in December. And it didn't take like an incredible amount of training. If nothing else, the only thing you really had to build up, and this isn't true for all of them, but for the one in New England, the biggest obstacle is that it's 12 miles long and it runs up and down a mountain. The obstacles I actually find to be the break in the whole thing, because the obstacles are like, okay, we can stop hiking up this mountain. and I mean, mind you, some of the obstacles did suck. Like, I mean, the one where you're crawling under these, like, you're crawling through water and there's these wires dangling down that have a live electricity hooked up to them, and you're getting popped by these live wires. That sucks. And actually, it was funny. The second year I did it, as I'm crawling through, all of a sudden I'm face down and water is rushing over me because, as far as I can figure, I got shocked in the head and just a quick blackout.
Yeah. Phantom, there's actual pictures and videos of Scott doing what he does, so again, buzz off. Anyway, so yeah, it's do you do it for the rush? Do you do those kind of events for the rush or the achievement?
It was definitely a big part of it was just, yeah, let me see if I can do this. And then after that, it came like, it was kind of a team thing. Like, I always went with like a group of people and we went together, and like, it was about training hard together and getting prepped and then going there and conquering the challenge.
Yeah, the successes sort of in that, the challenges are pretty helpful. I'd say ignore him. We can just let him roll if he wants to completely rage on our chat, but at this point, it's just pure trolling. So, I think
Yeah.
it's the judo thing. He's stuck on judo because his dad taught him judo,
Okay.
but I don't know. Anyway, so I gotta tell you, you look completely different without your beard, and it's absolutely bizarre to me. I'm like, who's
Yeah, no.
this?
It's weird for me now when I look at the pictures. I'm like, oh god.
Yeah, it's quite funny. So, okay, so am I allowed to mention that your wife has a different belief than you? Because I just mentioned it. Okay, so your wife believes differently than you. How do you balance that in your household? How does that work?
I mean, like it's
Which her belief is Wiccan, was it?
Celtic Reconstructionism.
Okay. Which for the layman, what's that like?
Um, it's sort of an attempt to reassemble the Celtic beliefs of old to be as close to their original iteration as they were. Um, and I mean, it's actually it's really a non-issue because I actually do find it all very interesting. So, I mean, usually when we talk about it, it's usually just kind of discussing the holidays, the celebrations, what this deity does, what's the history of this deity, and I mean, it's usually just fairly intellectual discussions. Not neither one of us is invested in making the other believe what they believe. Like, you know, the Celtic faith doesn't preach some sort of salvation, so there's no like incentive.
Is it like close to paganism then? For
Oh, absolutely, it's a pagan religion.
yeah.
It's
So,
it's
you,
a polytheistic faith. So I mean, to be fair, what do you mean by pagan? I suppose because paganism is a very generic term that refers to almost anything that's non-Abrahamic.
I mean, honestly, I don't know either what I would refer to because like sometimes it's
But yeah,
nature
no pagan.
worship or multiple gods. It really.
Yeah, pagan is accurate, definitely.
So do you ever find that your atheism and the paganism clash at all, or do you think it doesn't?
I think the closest it ever came to clashing was when we got on the topic of the afterlife and souls and minds and um and that was probably the closest it ever came to clashing. It's never really an issue because, yeah, Sheree just said in the side chat, druidic is an accurate term. Um, it's never really an issue because my wife doesn't try to use her beliefs as a substitute for taking action. It's just like kind of a supplemental thing that she does and practices, and a lot of it's engaging with her own heritage. So like honestly, like right from the get-go, and maybe it's because I played Dungeons and Dragons, but so the notion of polytheism has never really been that foreign to me, that it's always just been interesting to me. So it doesn't really pose a problem. And I know that's probably not as interesting an answer as some people might like, but that's short and long of it.
So I'm going to kind of segue into the idea of beliefs then, right?
Mhm.
So one thing that I've noticed with many skeptics that I've made friends with, and I hope I'm charitable, but my question is, do you feel the need as a skeptic and an atheist to, I don't know, correct what you think is not connected to reality?
Uh, to correct what's not connected to reality?
Yeah.
No, I not really. Like I'm 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 a skeptic, but I'm not trying to. I don't know. I'm not trying to like make other people skeptical. Like I try to explain my position and try to get that across, but I don't I don't I mean, like I kind of said earlier on, like really the stuff that I will tend to raise my hackles about. I will raise my hackles about is the kind of anti-science rhetoric.
I blame Van the man for raise my hackles out. That he has embedded that into our brains as a phrase to use. I'm telling you, Van the man, blame it. Like that's his phrase, man. Count how many times he uses it.
I actually have never noticed, so now I'll have to.
Yeah, you just like you said it and you go, where did I get that from? That's where you got it from. I promise you.
Well, no, I almost said like it hackles me, and I'm like, wait, that's not a thing.
It hackles me. It gets my hackles up. Okay. A lot of us Christians sometimes go, well, atheists, why aren't you attacking paganism? Why aren't you attacking Islam? Why aren't you attacking, another religion? Sometimes Islam gets the stick because of all the violence that we see. But Judaism, why aren't you attacking Jainism? Why aren't you attacking? Well, Jainism's really hard to attack because like there's not a whole lot that you can say, oh, that's super wrong with that. But paganism's one where it's almost like I'll watch pagans and deists get like sort of a free ride. So they get to criticize, pagans and deists get to criticize us Christians on the side with sniping. And they get this free ride of, we'll accept your beliefs because we're busy fighting Christians. Do you think it's because of politics mainly?
I mean, I think politics certainly plays a role. But I think part of it is, and at the risk of sort of showing my corporate background, is there's this notion of the 80-20 rule. 80% of the problem is made up by 80% of the work. What is it? You want to target the 80%, which is usually made up of like crap. Now I'm like totally fucking this up, but it has to do with like 80% of the problem is really only 20% of the work. It's really, I think, just a matter of Christianity is so prevalent. And I mean, I have never been afraid to be critical of those who use Islam as a justification for violence, though I think I would be critical of anyone who uses any religious belief as a justification for violence. Hell, Phantom. But yeah, it does often happen, and I think a lot of it is just that the deists and the pagans a lot of times just aren't, they aren't throwing a wrench into whatever argument tack that we're going into. So I think a lot of times it's just boils down to, what, they're not really, it's just not part of the fight at the moment. For me personally, like deism, I have a hard time arguing with deism because I most of the time that most deists that I have seen, there's no way to show that deism would be any different than like there's no sense of this is how things would be different if deism weren't the case. So it falls victim to like the null hypothesis that there's no way to compare the two. Whereas like, Christianity makes some hefty claims about the nature of reality and how reality came to be. And for some, they take that claim to a much larger degree than others. Looking at the young Earth creationists and even the old Earth creationists who think that all-powerful being just spoke everything into existence in one shot.
Well, even theistic evolutionists do believe that, the Big Bang would have been set forth from a creator. So, I mean, all three beliefs, all three stances do still believe in a supernatural and in the creator,
It's true, but the claim that claim, the theistic evolution claim, is much harder to falsify because it's pushed back just beyond the limits of what we're able to look at and understand. So, I mean, I think it's hard to substantiate, but it's not as absurd on its face as being presented with like young Earth creationism, where it's like we're just going to ignore the fossil record, we're going to ignore how floods actually work, we're going to ignore thermodynamics, we're going to ignore basic biology of the last, say, 1,000 years, even if you want to try to like dismiss everything about evolution, speciation is a thing that has happened. And those are the ones that it's like, that's crazy. And
I've met a lot of creationists that will believe in speciation, but they do this weird thing with the kinds, like
that's some bullshit. But
well,
it's
it's a way to like kind of explain Noah's Ark, right? The kinds, like there's one bear,
Yeah, but their timeline still is, even if they're willing to accept speciation, their timeline is still completely fucked, because as has been pointed out,
yeah, there's no way that they can spread out that quickly.
Right, there's no way the speciation, at the rate it would have to go at it, it's something like 11 species would have to emerge a day, or something absurd like that. It would have to happen so quickly compared to what the Bible claims was the initial group.
Yeah.
And what it has become today. It's like, I agree with probably the majority of scholars that the global flood probably was a very large local flood.
Well, I claim that it's a large local flood, like the world as they knew it.
Right.
Because the world was small to them,
Right. And I mean, that makes sense within the cultural context of the Bible. So it's it makes sense to me.
But even then, I don't know if you can completely prove even a local one. But I don't know. So, but
there's been floods around those areas. So I mean,
yeah. But it is one of those interesting stories. There's some interesting stories that are culturally shared that I don't necessarily bring as evidence, but I think it's interesting that they're culturally shared. And the flood story is one that is culturally shared. And I think that's it's interesting to me.
Oh, I mean, there's so many things that are culturally shared. The notion of vampires has managed to go across far and wide. Though the Far East conception of vampires is very, very different. I think they're called Kuei-jin, and they're something else. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has carried itself from our cultures, and I mean, part of that, if all of our research is to be believed, we all came originally from Africa at one point. And it's possible that there are oral traditions that have just stayed in passing that long. I mean, I think they say like 10,000, they roughly 10,000 years ago, humanity was nearly wiped out. I think we were down to a population of 1,000 or so people.
I'd have to look that up. I don't know for sure. I'd have to maybe tap into I have a human anthropologist friend of mine. I'll be like, so.
There was. I know there was a near extinction event some time ago. It may have been longer than 10,000 years ago, but I know there was a near extinction event. And it's evident at the very least. It's evident in our genome, the point where it bottlenecks.
Have you ever seen the website 23andMe?
I have not. What is it?
They do this thing where they test your DNA and they try to figure out where you're from, your lineage, just from that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's really interesting. A friend of mine found out that he was Jewish and had no idea he was Jewish. And then he did research in his family. And then a couple people who were killed in Israel due to like a Palestinian bombing, he found out were his cousins. They were like second cousins or something like that. And so he wouldn't have known that, all of that stuff if he hadn't done that initial test. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. She suggested it, a friend of mine who's a human anthropologist suggested it to me because she thought that, I don't know, because I'm adopted, it might be helpful to know more about like roots and stuff. Because to her, roots are important. It's something that really gets her excited for some reason. But I don't know. I thought it was an interesting idea that you could, look at your DNA and kind of figure out like where you came from, which is really fascinating in a way.
Yeah, my wife actually went through like ancestry.com. They do the same kind of thing where you get like a DNA swab and they'll kind of run down your lineage. And yeah, I've been meaning to do that too, because there's sort of a sticking question that I want to get solved. because there's a blood type mismatch between me and my mom. And so either she's mistaken and, the Ancestry.com test will clear that up, or there's something else going on. But, if it was a mismatch with my dad, it'd be like, well, we could assume, all sorts of fun things. But mismatching with my mom is a little weirder. So that's something it's on my to-do list to get the genetic history mapped out. Also to see, my family claims to be completely French Canadian, but I wonder how true that is.
Well, French Canadian. Well, I mean, French Canadians. I mean, they're sort of like Irish Americans. You're imported still.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even then, like do we really originate from France or Gaul, as it were?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's all kind of interesting ideas. I guess I think what's interesting is to think about everybody that's come before you, and that has an effect on who you are today, which is kind of an amazing thing. So I guess this goes back to like this idea of legacy, right? Do you ever think about legacy? I mean, as an atheist, you don't have an afterlife, right, in mind. So what are you? What's the meaning of life to you? Is legacy a big deal, or like what do you think?
That actually is a good question. I think in that regard, I always sort of take sort of a bit of an existentialist view, and I'm sure someone who's very versed in philosophy is going to rip me a new one and say that this isn't existentialist at all. But I like the notion that rather than having a legacy of like something physical, because I look at physical things as also being temporary, but the people that I have interacted with and will interact with and hopefully have some positive impact on, I like to believe that they that positive influence would extend down to the people that they talk to, and I guess if I had to say that what a legacy was, that would be it.
Yeah, live chat's designed for an interaction with the guest. So every so often, it's not that I think what like Phantom's saying is that horrible that he has to be denied, because he's really not that horrible. It's that there's this derailment that happens, right? So it's like
on topic or get the fuck out.
Yeah. Like Renee's just like, hey, I like Scott. I want to talk to Scott. And then Tom's like, oh, I don't like Renee. I want to talk to Renee because I don't like Renee. Like, and so what happens is like instead of like, hey, let's visit with Scott, it's hey, let's watch somebody flip out in live chat because they're babies. So yeah, cry all you want. I call you a crybaby, and that's why. So. You can call me a Poe. I know who I am. I know who I worship. I know who I care about. I know how I feel about people. You can call me whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that's my name.
Yeah, apparently I might also be full of it. I don't know.
Yep, you're a liar. It's okay.
Apparently.
So, all right. So, do you have things like that you're involved in that's like for charity, or do you have like some sort of like side thing that you like to do that maybe with your community or anything like that?
Well, I do yearly the Muckfest, which is an event in New Jersey, or at least I think it's kind of like the Tough Mudder, and I think there's several around, but the one we go to is in New Jersey. It's like a baby Tough Mudder, but it's dedicated to MS and supporting MS.
Oh, cool.
And I have a cousin who was diagnosed with it.
Okay, is it like reoccurring? Like what do they call it? Intermittent?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
MS.
Mm-hmm. There's different kinds of MS, I guess. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically. Well, actually, I should say I have a cousin, and I also have like a step uncle who also has it, and his is recurring.
oh, okay.
Uh, and I mean, it can seem short sighted, but I don't know when you really see the devastating effects of it kind of hits a little closer to home. What just how awful that is. I mean, I've literally had to watch. I mean, my cousin's still like, they caught it very, very early. So like her chances are very good. And it hasn't really hit her that hard yet. She's still in college. So caught it very early on. But with my uncle, I mean, sometimes there's just like, there are family functions he just won't come to because the person's house has stairs. And I mean, he's in his 40s and 5 steps into a house at this point for him is absolutely a monumental undertaking. His father is pushing 90 and moves much more easily than he does. So it's a hard thing to watch.
Yeah, I've heard that there's been some changes on the front of MS, and but the medication for MS, people don't really know this, but the medication is actually ridiculously expensive, and
Yeah.
just all sorts of hurdles financially for people with MS that I think people don't realize for whatever reason. I don't really know why it's so freaking expensive, but it is.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you why it's expensive, but
Because the
mean,
drug industries are super corrupt. I mean, I can cross the border, right? I can cross the border, and something that costs me $90 here costs $7 in Mexico across the border. It's ridiculous. Anyway,
yeah, no, let's not go into healthcare in the United States because I don't necessarily want to wax too political, but yeah, no, I agree that medications for things like MS need to be affordable because the alternative is just it's awful to watch because it is one of those things that's just degenerative and it's just going to keep getting worse, and that's a scary notion, which is probably more scary to me than dying.
well, yeah, yeah. A friend of mine, his wife has been diagnosed with MS, and they figured out that she had it by at first they thought she was having strokes because her left side would just stop working and stuff. And so when they found out, they did a, I don't know what they call it, like a brain scan. It starts with an
CT
M.
scan,
CG,
MRI.
MRI. I think an MRI. I think it was an MRI. I hope I'm using the right term. And they saw lesions because it causes lesions all over your brain, and it was pretty serious. So, and I know for them it was ridiculously horribly expensive, even with healthcare. And they have 4 kids, so it's tremendously crippling. And she, I mean, for her, it's frustrating because it affects some of her mental ability because when she has, I don't know if you want to call it an episode or what, but it's also frightening because you can think but you can't speak, or like it just like she was having all sorts of weird, almost like what you would think would be a stroke, and so so I think MS is a absolutely worthy cause. I am encouraged though when I kind of read various science things that there seems like they're making headway on that one.
Yeah, the sort of downer in some regards is that a lot of the advancements still are very dependent on early detection. And that's kind of, that's one of the bigger challenges is that if you don't catch it early, once the damage is done, the damage is done. Because each time you have, I guess you'd call it an attack, it usually causes permanent damage. So any advances that can be done are often, preventative, because once the, brain damage from lesions is damage done at that point.
Yeah, it's no joke. And also it affects your vision. Your vision can get affected. I mean, all sorts of weird things can happen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, so definitely a worthy cause, and it's something that I fully support. Up and coming for Christmas Eve season, and I'm gonna let the bag out early a little bit. Both Max and I are reaching across the aisle as Christians, and we want to reach across the aisle to secular people, and we'll have more news on the events soon. But Floyd FP's already agreed to join us, and Jackie Kite. But we're going to end up doing a fundraiser soon with Operation Smile, which, if you don't know what Operation Smile is, it's sort of like Doctors Against Borders, except doctors actually specifically go to repair cleft palates.
Oh, cool.
And so this Christmas season, in the spirit of goodwill and the spirit of putting aside differences and being kind to one another, we're going to have an event planned to promote that charity. So as more information comes together, we'll let you know. But again, Floyd and Jackie have already agreed to participate. So just kind of letting you guys get a heads up. So it's sort of an opportunity to give without creed getting in the way, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if I can participate, I will. I mean,
yeah.
I don't have a ton of money to throw around, but I would certainly like to help in some capacity if I can.
Yeah, awesome. So, trying to think. We've covered your Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, from your experience with the Christian faith, did you pull out anything good from it, or did you pull out all bad? Like, what would you say your experience was with that?
I mean, I certainly didn't pull out all bad. I mean, I always thought, when I was introduced to the Golden Rule, I mean, I do like that. At the risk of cherry picking some, I mean, I thought that there were some good teachings in there that are worth cherry picking. Eisegesis, I guess you might say. So, like, the Golden Rule certainly jumps to mind. I liked the Beatitudes. I thought those were pretty good, and a lot of the parables that Jesus told, I thought were all pretty valuable. The Old Testament, not so much. Like the Ten Commandments are decent, but they're not they weren't even novel for the time in which they were written. But I do enjoy like the Old Testament is one of those, like, almost feels like reading a fantasy novel sometimes. But the New Testament, I thought a lot of the parables had good lessons that were worth drawing on, even if you take out the notion that it's going to somehow, like, win you favor in God's eyes. I remember thinking, even at high school age, that I felt my actions were cheapened if I were doing them for the express purpose of getting into heaven, or even at the notion of some reward other than, the reward that other than, obviously you can never get away from the notion that you're going to may feel good about yourself for doing something good for people. So I don't really hold that against anyone, but the notion that there is some larger reward, like when I've had friends who ran into a tight spot and I gave them some money, and as a rule, I just assumed that I'm never getting that money back, and I'm okay with that. And that's kind of the heart of it, is that I think that the right thing is worth doing for its own sake, not out of any notion of a reward.
I think the reward thing and the gold star thing isn't necessarily my carrot on the stick either. I remember going to Sunday school. I know this is kind of weird, but and I was really good at memorizing verses, and it still kicks in today. Like, I can still. It's weird. I can't always do it, like, on call, but just out of the blue, I'll just be able to recite, boom, like, this is from this, and I'll remember. And I might not remember the address because I have problems with numbers, but I'll remember where to find it. I'll know what book, and a lot of that, was from, learning it as the youth, but I always memorize it in the NIV version because that's where I started, and everybody goes, the not inspired version, oh my goodness. but but they come to mind, and there's some sort of effect, I guess, there, but they would do this thing where it was like, you get a gold star or you get a cookie or something if you memorize a verse, and I was like, I don't need a gold star, I don't want your cookie. And they just used to look at me like, you're the strangest kid. Like, what the heck?
I remember my freshman year of high school, and I don't think I could do it now, but my freshman year of high school, when the peer ministers came into our Catholic traditions class, and they decided to go over the Stations of the Cross with us. And so they were doing like, does anyone know what the first one is? And me and one other guy were able to rattle off every single one of the Stations of the Cross. And it just came down to, during Lent, going to, grammar school, I had to go to Stations of the Cross every week.
Yeah, so it stuck with you still, huh?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things did. Like, my mom was almost baffled when maybe a year or two ago, we got onto the topic of how the masses run, and like I still remembered, like, first reading, second reading, and gospel and homily, and I was of the opinion that the gospel and homily is probably the most valuable part of that entire series of readings. Because the first reading and second reading is kind of like, here's something in the Old Testament. Here's how it was filled in the New Testament. It's like, that's great. But then you take the gospel and homily, and it's like, all right, here is something that Jesus did in his life. And here is a lesson that I think, depending on whether it was the deacon or the priest, they would pull some lesson, some ultimate moral to draw from that and relate it to the group. And it's like, you know what, that has some value. It makes you think, and it makes you it makes you like have to, like, check yourself and think about things. And the first and second reading, it's like, who gives a shit? I mean, really, if you're already coming to Catholic Mass, I don't think we need to sell you on the fulfilled prophecy thing. But maybe that's just me. So, I mean, yeah, to circle way back around, yeah, no, I definitely, I don't like look back and resent that I was raised in a family that went to a Catholic church. It just never really clicked for me. And I always found it, like, at least somewhat interesting academically, but like, I never felt anything going to church. And I mean, I even went to some Protestant churches because we had friends and family that went to those churches, and I went to those, and I found the Protestant churches were friendlier with each other, whereas the Catholic masses can come off as pretty cold.
Yeah, they're not there for a social club.
No, like, even when you do like shake hands with the person near you, it's always kind of like this, like, forced, like, oh yeah, hi, I'm going to, like, hit these 6 people that are all within range of me. And it definitely came off as just very, like, this is protocol. This is what you do now. This is what you do now. Stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, sit down, kneel, sit up. And it was all just very regimented. And
the appeal for me isn't ritual, but the liturgical churches, Orthodoxy included, actually there's a lot more appeal to Orthodoxy, to be honest, but the liturgical churches take the rock star pastor thing out of the equation, and they take
I mean, the charismatic
the social
traditions
club out of the equation, which is really interesting.
Yeah, the charismatic traditions I always have found to I tend to feel very wary about.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would fall into a charismatic tradition, but I would say that even if you're Reformed Baptist or you're a Methodist or whatever, Methodists are a little more regimented, but there's this accidentally falling into I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Saved.
Yes,
but
I have. That was a great movie.
I was that youth director at one point. It was down with the God, like, trying
so hard to be cool with the kids.
Well, actually, I was really popular with the kids. But there's this sort of image of like you got to have a good program, and you have to have good music, and you have to have this sort of, and it's not. And I'm like, at one point I'm like, we need to strip this down because it's about God. It's not about entertainment.
I Saved was a really good movie.
It was.
And I think
actually.
that, and I almost feel bad because I feel like there's a lot of people who would dismiss that movie because they think that it's just going to be mocking Christianity. And it's not so much mocking Christianity as it is mocking people who approach it in a very hypocritical fashion.
Yeah. So it's not about are Christians bad? That's my husband barking in the background. That's a sneeze. But
Jesus.
It is about hypocrisy. Exactly. It's about saying, "Oh, I love you," like Jesus does, and being absolutely unloving. And it's I think it's well needed, and I think it's a fair criticism and stuff. And I would put it on a list of movies that I actually did appreciate. I thought it was kind of helpful in some way, but and not hateful. Like it was satirical, but it actually I didn't feel like it was hateful at all.
Like I loved at the beginning of the movie when the girl is painting the giant like wooden Jesus cutout, and the brother's just like, "Wasn't Jesus Middle Eastern?" As she's painting him very clearly white. And she's like, "No, of course not." And it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's Middle America Bible Belt right there.
Yeah, there's so many funny lines in that movie. I'm drawing a blank, but there's some that are just. I think the exorcism part's one of my favorite parts, where the youth pastor goes to the kids and goes, "Okay, it looks like Mary's going through a hard time. Can you guys, like." Go and talk to her and
they try to exorcise her,
and the girl's like, "You can kill her." And he's like, "Maybe something less thuggish, she needs a gentle touch." And they go, "Okay." And then they go in the van and they pull her into the van like they're kidnapping her and they're trying to do an exorcism. And just like it kind of I had this flashback of some of my experiences with some of the Christians that I grew up with, because like I had good friends that would do these just stupid things. I thought they were really stupid. Like we'd be in a car, right? And just regular pop radio would be on. It wouldn't even be like metal or anything like that. Like regular pop radio would be on, and I'd be like in the front seat riding shotgun, and my friend would like, it was their car, so they're playing their music. And my two friends that decided to get all super holy roller, like we're the Christian girls, we're the sisterhood of the Christianness. Like they actually put on their, at that time it was Walkmans with CD players, and they put on their Walkmans, and they're just like, "We don't do secular music." And they put on their Walkmans to listen to their Jesus DC talk or whatever it was. And I remember looking at them like, "Seriously, are you not going to participate in a conversation because you have to be holy?" And they just looked at me like, "I can't believe you said that." Like, but that stuff actually would go on, and it was like this weird form of legalism applied by young people. It's like a youth pastor would say, "Hey, something kind of gentle," and they'd take that into this extreme kind of.
Yeah, and
emotion.
I mean, I think that's a mark of being younger. I remember like I played basketball when I was in junior high because my dad was the assistant coach, and it was kind of obligatory. And I remember we had one player who, if you told him to do something, he would do it, but he would do it to the exclusion of everything else that he might also want to be doing at that time. And it was just this kind of like all or nothing mentality. If you do something, you do that. And kids tend to take feedback and run with that. And rather than try to like take that feedback and integrate it into some larger body, it's just kind of just boom, this is what we're doing now. And I think religious instruction can certainly indulge that behavior if left unchecked.
I just was thinking of a line that I liked from that movie. I know what you're thinking, Mary, and Jesus does too, because Mary just glances at the guy that's jogging by and like it's like, lust, you know. And I'm just like, oh, that just kind of reminded me of all the stupid things that like people would say to each other. Yeah, yeah. But I think as people grew and mature, it actually got better with some people I knew. People that would hit you with a ton of bricks eventually kind of moved out of that kind of, I would say, kind of legalistic mindset of, am I holy enough? I don't know. I better try really hard to be super holy and make everybody else super holy too, and everybody really uncomfortable, so that way I can prove my Christianness, you know. And I think that slowly, you know, kind of like the people that would obnoxiously pray loud at Denny's. That happened too, because we used to go to Denny's because we're kids, Denny's was the thing, and the poor waitress would be like, oh no, these people, and
Oh God.
and because when you're young, you're just always the obnoxious ones, and not only were we obnoxious, but we had people that were holy rollers that would like pray really loudly, God, I just I'm like, oh no, like not only because I knew as a teenager we aren't really. The servers go, oh, these people, I hope I get a tip, or let's put them way in the back so that the adults don't freak out, like, so I don't know. It was, I don't know, Christian youth and the silly things that happen. It's just, I don't know. It makes me laugh. It's funny, but
I grew up in the Northeast, so we didn't see a lot of that.
Oh, really?
No, I think it has something to do with the weather. People keep to themselves a bit more up here.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that whole hanging out in the cellar thing doesn't happen here.
The whole what?
The whole hanging out in the cellar, like that 70s show, kind of like doesn't happen here. Like we go places.
Yeah, like I mean, growing up, like it was always we were at some friend's house. I think the only place we ever like went out to, and of course, nerds that I am. We went to this cyber cafe basically because they had like these computers that had like a boatload of games on them, so we could just all go in, pay for like a couple hours, and we'd like do like a multiplayer Battlefield 1942.
When I was young 20s, we would do Halo LAN parties. And those were they were more fun than playing online, man. Like, LAN parties, when you would actually hook up different systems and be in the same house, were absolutely hilarious. And I kind of miss those kind of times. Those were really hilarious. Anyway, so we're almost at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to ask some more pointed questions, and we're going to get on. This is your last chance. If you're in chat and you actually want to ask a question that relates to Scott instead of fighting, and that goes to everybody pretty much, except Sherry. Sherry's been pretty much on subject. Thank you, Sherry. We like you. You can come back. If you have any questions to ask, now's the time to ask. In the meantime, I'm going to ask another question, and I would say that if you found that atheism wasn't true, like sometime in your life, and you were convinced otherwise, and I won't even declare a religion, but that you believed in God, would you be disappointed, or would you be happy? Like do you want to believe, or would you be indifferent to it? Would you be angry about it?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say because for me to even give like a coherent answer, it would there were so many ifs involved in terms of like, if it turned out to be a god, well, what was that god like? I mean, I wouldn't be upset if I found out that a god exists. No Rizla, no caregiver is around to assist me. If I found out that a god exists, I don't think I wouldn't be like upset about that. I would have questions. And I would certainly hope that I could, if we had some verifiable way to confirm that a god exists, my hope would be that we have some verifiable way to actually communicate with this being. So hopefully, we can get some questions answered.
If God exists, would he be good or bad, or you don't know?
If there were a being that we could define as God, I suspect that they would be so alien to us as to almost be incomprehensible. Because to have the attributes of a god would make you so not so inhuman. And I don't mean that in a moral sense. I mean that in a just a qualitative sense. Do I want to believe? I mean, I have no particular distaste for believing. I just have not yet found a reason to believe. So I don't know if I want to believe, but I'd like to, if there is a God, I certainly would want to know.
Uriah says, what do you find is the most convincing argument for theism?
What do I find to be the most convincing argument for theism? I find probably the most convincing arguments I see tend to be on the notion of almost like a deistic conception of a god, in that you can argue that there must be a god out there that or something that probably deserves that title simply by its qualities, that most likely was somehow able to start this grand machine that we call a universe. So I guess those are probably the ones that I find the most persuasive. The problem is that they're almost completely unfalsifiable. So whether or not the problem is that whether they were true or not is almost irrelevant, because if it's true, things are the way they are. If they're not true, it still be exactly the same. Like, they don't. There's no explanatory power. Transhuman? No, Sherry, I don't know if I would say I would call them trans.
You gotta repeat. So, because
Sherry is asking if transhuman might be the term I would use rather than inhuman to describe the god. I don't know if I would say transhuman, because transhuman, at least the way I look at it, is something that has transitioned beyond humanity, and I suspect that whatever this being is utterly alien. It would have to be, given the properties necessary for it to be considered a god. It would have it. Transhuman to me involves, it implies some sort of like progressed from human, or correct, even progressed beyond human. Whereas I don't think it would have even human as a starting point, nor should it, given what it would have to be.
Okay, so in your mind, what would be the most noble aspiration for a human being to pursue? Like, what are your key values, I guess?
I think probably my key values would be some amount of understanding. Like, if you could spend your life trying to build bridges between people, trying to get people to have a better understanding of each other, and to help people reach an understanding with each other, because as I am seeing more and more these days, it seems like groups are forming that are so dogmatic that they're almost incapable of having a conversation with anyone that does not agree with them, and that to me is probably the scariest notion of humanity, that we could start to have conversations that are not possible. And so I would say that I think that we as a species would be so much better off if we were open to discussion and trying to understand each other. A lot of these extremist groups that we're seeing now that are doing all sorts of horrible atrocities do so because they have sort of locked themselves in this echo chamber, and they don't want to hear about the people that they demonize. They want to treat them as less as subhuman in some sense. They want to create this environment where they don't have to like worry about whether or not they're hurting someone.
I've heard a lot of Christians say that you are a great candidate for Christianity, and some have predicted that you would convert. And I'm going to kind of also add that Christopher Motti gets that a lot too. But so you're in good company, I think. I enjoy both of you. But,
I think so.
But how does that make you feel? Do you feel like your feelings and your thoughts are not being taken under consideration? Do you kind of take it as a you're next kind of thing? Because people do that to me too. Like, you're going to be an atheist or you're going to be a deist, you're next. And sometimes I have this like you're next kind of attitude pointed at me, like kind of vicious almost, instead of like kind. Do you take it as a kind thing or like a sort of a weird attack?
So I mean, on the one hand, I mean, I'm not upset by it. I think a lot of that comes down to that a lot of the people I think who make that prediction haven't spent a lot of time talking to me, because I'm a pretty affable guy. I like talking to people. I like conversations, and I love a friendly chat with whoever. But I didn't come to where I am trivially. Like I didn't just sort of arrive at this like I don't believe in God as sort of just like a laziness. And I sort of take this like I take a little umbrage at the fact that they think that I am. It makes me feel like they think I'm easily swayed, and that's a little irritating. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just a little bit of a narcissist. So I mean, I certainly don't mind that there are people who like me and want me on their side. I can't say I'm overly bothered by that. Oh, Tom. So upset.
Tom's so smart. He thinks I blocked him, but I totally see everything he's saying. So again, herpaderp. Anyway, like it's just frustrating. This whole chat. It's like me, and that's just what was happening with Mark Thomas. Me. I'm a Jehovah's Witness, but I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm so tricky and smart. And let me fight with Ozzy in the chat. That was what it was with Mark Thomas, and it's just like, no, why don't you actually participate in the conversation? Holy cow. But anyway, so yeah, it's been an interesting live chat. Sometimes our live chats are more fruitful, sometimes they're less. It depends. Roy's wasn't really particularly fruitful either. Pretty much I got from Roy's chat was, we don't like Roy. It was pretty much like kind of like what I got from that, and so poor Roy doesn't get much participation, but Roy, I guess we get our reputations, but okay, so I do think that us atheists are after you. No, you're right. It's not that atheists are after me. It's just that people have this way of speaking to each other, like your feelings and your thoughts aren't really your thoughts. You don't really think, but I think, I explore, I think, my thoughts, my feelings, my decisions are just fine, but yours aren't. And so I think we have this habit sometimes, I kind of say we, but a lot of different people have this habit of sort of putting words in other people's mouths or motivations in other people's heads, and so yeah. So do you feel like since you've been in this community that you've become more understanding of certain things, or do you feel like this actually causes more division? Because I've questioned that.
Ooh, that is a tough one. So it has certainly opened my mind to some belief sets that I didn't realize were still in practice. Uh, prior to coming to the Great Debate community, I had no idea that Calvinism was still really a thing. Um, I just don't remember it being really talked about. I remember like Calvinism, like from like my social studies class, like, when we're going up through U.S. history, we talked about Calvinism, and then it kind of, the way the history class said it was like, yeah, and that kind of just, it didn't really take off. So I don't know if that was like the Catholic bias playing in there, but I mean, it also didn't help that I grew up in the Northeast, so Calvinism is virtually unheard of up here. It's, I mean, Catholic is definitely the most prevalent religion in the Northeast. And in terms of promoting understanding, depends on where you look. I mean, I at the risk of sounding a little pretentious, I try my Gone Rogue series is really what I'm trying to do with those is to promote an open discussion on a topic, and hopefully everyone walks away from it with some food for thought, and maybe picking up on other ideas, rather than like trying to host some kind of like heated debate, where everyone could sit there and argue about something and walk away feeling utterly assured that they won and everyone else is dumb. And I think that there are places that are venues for that. I don't know. This is a crazy community that's that you can find pretty much all venues. I mean, there's a lot out there that I have just had to watch and laugh, and some of it that I've sat there and gotten so frustrated that like I had to walk away. So it's okay. So I'm not I'm my hope is that at the very least the Great Debate community comes out with a net balance of 0 in terms of understanding. I feel like that I have attained better understanding of a lot of people, and I'd like to try to get some people in the community to maybe try to understand others better, but that may not be the case. I'd like to try though, and I would like to see more conversations happen rather than fighting.
Yeah, I agree. More conversations than fighting. Yeah, and that's why I was trying to encourage the chat to stop. And it's one of those things where, yeah, there's some people that just want to fight, and then cry. It's one of those things, like it's a game, I guess. But I think I'm going to steal Christopher Mahdi's phrase, which I was just in an offer hangout with him the other day. If you want to play at the big boys table, act like a big boy. So, I might be starting to just, if you can't be a big boy in chat, then that's it. I'm tired of it. But yeah, the the uncharitableness is something I think that gets me frustrated, and I think I've been uncharitable on accident, but I don't think I'm usually uncharitable on purpose. So sometimes I think part of it is that we have to slow down and figure out if we're talking past each other, right? Mm-hmm. One time I was arguing with Jesus DiCaprio, and I felt like I was defending my faith, and he felt like he was defending his faith, and we were arguing past each other. And then I found out that he completely defines some words absolutely differently. And so we're spending 3 hours arguing where we could have probably spent 45 minutes arguing, and like it was ridiculous.
I remember probably one of the most frustrating conversations I ever had was trying to explain to someone that while atheism is not a religion, there are religions that don't espouse a belief in a god or gods and are therefore atheistic in nature. And he just kept saying, but atheists always say that atheism isn't a religion. And I remember like being absolutely at my wit's end trying to explain this to them. And sometimes like it's so hard to get a common understanding of the terms you're using. What's a hypo critter?
I don't know. I think he likes.
Is that some sort of like small critter?
Yeah, I'm thinking like I want to be a platypus.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, like I think that'd be awesome. Can I be a platypus?
Are they monotremes?
I don't know.
I think platypus is considered a monotreme. They're neat.
I don't know. They just look like creation has like goofed up and like put random leftover parts together.
Well, the platypus is interesting because if I remember correctly, at one time they were sort of the standard of what evolution produced. And now they're kind of like a last vestige of that time.
Yeah, fun fact, I used to work at the zoo, and which was probably my most favorite job I've ever had. So you would, even though I was retail, I learned a lot about the animals and stuff. And one of the fun facts is Australia will not let go of their platypi, whatever, puss is. I don't know what the multiple is of that, but they won't let go of them. They'll give us some koalas and stuff, but they won't give us platypus because I don't know. There's just not as many of them, or I don't know. They're super special, basically. Was what I'm saying. They love their platypus.
I didn't realize they were an endangered species.
I don't know if they're considered endangered or not. They're just really protected by Aussies. Like they're just like, no, you can't have them.
Well, koalas are a mess.
I believe in God, so if you're gonna make an accusation of me being an atheist and a believer's cloaking, you would not be accurate. You could maybe be closer saying I'm a deist, but then even then, that's not even really accurate either. But I could almost see someone making that accusation. But calling me an atheist is just silly, especially since a Gnostic Christian is a next door neighbor of an atheist, if I ever did see one. Sorry, Gnosticism really gets, like, they're always weirdos. Always. Sorry, Tom, but whether it's Beasley or Commando, Gnosticism is one of those things where it's I'm a special snowflake. Here we go. Anyway.
I've only been to the zoo a few times. And at first I enjoy it, but I end up feeling depressed by the time I leave. Because I kind of walk out and I'm like, man, they shouldn't be in cages. And I realize that for some of them, this is like one of the few ways to like, conserve the species. So I understand that zoos are helping, but it's still always sad to see animals in these small enclosures.
Yeah, I agree. The zoo that I mean, in my city is, I would argue one of the best in the world, but there is this. There's something wrong with seeing, a bird in a cage, so to speak.
I'm trying to think.
But a lot of the animals that they picked up, like their orangutans, for instance, a lot of them were part of the illegal pet trade, and so they were rescued in that way. And so these orangutans will come up to the window and go play with me humans, and so they'll have a window and they'll play games with the kids and stuff like that because they like people, because they were used to. So I mean, but then there's ones that are born in captivity and stuff, and so I do see that. But I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know why I'm getting all like animals, but I like animals. I really do, actually.
I love animals. My cat jumped on my lap earlier. That's one of two cats, and I've got a dog who is probably hanging out with my wife because I think my wife's reading in bed. So.
But I don't know if you know this, but the fires have put the orangutans recently. If you look it up, the orangutans are under huge threats because of the fires that are happening, and they're dying like en masse right now, and it's really scary. So, I really like orangutans because they're really smart, and I don't know. They were one of my favorites at the zoo. So anyway, but I do agree that there was something really sad about it at the same time. But it's almost necessary in some ways, and
For some animals,
yeah.
yeah. Like koala bears.
But we have the safari park here. They call it the safari
Oh,
park.
yeah. I
And
went
it's
to one
a
of those
huge,
ones. Those are
yeah,
neat.
it's a huge open range and stuff like that. It's still not perfect or anything, but it's a lot better than just hi, I'm in a cage, you know. But I see you. I see you. So
Yeah, I went to a park safari in Canada a couple
okay.
times, just north of the border in Vermont. But the last zoo that I remember going to was in Seattle. When my wife and I went out there for our honeymoon, and it was fun. Other than we vastly underestimated how far it was from our hotel, and it ended up being a long ass walk.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
But
You're like, are we there yet?
oh my god. And we ended up having to take a cab back because we went from the zoo to a restaurant, and they paired it was a taster's menu, so it was like 7 courses, and they paired every course with a glass of wine. And, you know, waste not, want not. I drank every single one of those damn glasses of wine.
So you took an alternate route probably because you couldn't walk in a straight line.
Yeah, no, we took a cab because
Okay.
I wasn't making it home. I was sweating wine at that point. But, you know, I didn't make myself a bourbon.
Would you consider yourself a Christian? I almost said Christian humanist because I play with that word and get everybody upset. Would you consider yourself a secular humanist, or how would you self-describe your philosophy that goes along with atheism? Because atheism isn't really a philosophy, right? So
No, I mean, I have seen some people try to make it a big thing. Oh, now he's citing freedom of speech. He doesn't understand freedom of speech.
the Shamu show is not being ended. It turns out. Yeah, I'm in San Diego. The San Diego SeaWorld Shamu show is being phased out as far as the way, you know, first they took out the trainers, you know, riding on them and stuff like that and on their nose and jumping off. And now I think they're going to phase off the type of show that they're doing, and they're going to do something more conservation based, or I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what SeaWorld does, but yeah, I am uncomfortable with orcas being in captivity. I have an uncle who's a marine biologist, and what I know of orcas and what I know of whales and stuff, I just don't think they belong in captivity, even more so than an elephant. Even, and elephants, you know, do a lot of migration as well. But
So to your question about secular humanism, I don't know. It's weird. I do agree with a lot of the secular humanist like ideals and what they fight for, but I almost feel like calling myself a secular humanist would imply I take a certain level of activism, and I don't know. Unless you count like pointing out to people in comment threads, I'm not like an activist. I mean, yeah, I agree with secular. I don't. I'm not good with with these sorts of labels because I mean, yeah, I do agree with most things with secular humanism. I agree with many various social movements that are in play right now, and I don't want to name any names because I don't want to have this explode into something else. But I can't say for sure. I can't say for sure that I would label myself as a secular humanist, but I do consider myself a humanist in a fundamental sense because I don't. I have a problem with like hurting people. Like there's a lot of like those trolley problems that like they really like they make my heart hurt because of how much I am uncomfortable with executing people or having to make that decision that someone is going to die. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't encountered a tenet of secular humanism that I disagree with. So, I mean, I wouldn't balk at the label, I guess, but I wouldn't call myself one. I realize that's a really long, roundabout answer.
Yeah, I was wondering because I was thinking if I could slap a label on you, it might be secular humanist, that's me on the outside, and I let people declare their own flags and whatever they are, but on the outside, sometimes you look, from my observation, you look kind of towards like that thing, but
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like, I mean, when it comes to social matters, I say I'm a moderate in all things, but when it comes to social stuff, like I am pretty liberal.
yeah. So the purpose of my show is oftentimes to bring understanding and allow my guests to have a voice that isn't interrupted and drowned out by 10 other people in a hangout. And sometimes I agree, disagree, whatever, but I actually hold back a lot of my beliefs because I want to not engage in debate, but actually try to understand. So if that looks like a defense on my guest, so be it. I actually will defend my guest. It doesn't matter if you're Veckel. It doesn't matter if you're Scott. It doesn't matter, if you're Maximus or whatever. If you're a guest, this is your time to have a voice. And so Scott, if you this is your time to pretend like you have a soapbox and a pulpit, right? And if you could soapbox for the community and kind of request everybody to, maybe aim for a certain, value or maybe try for a certain goal, what would it be?
If I could boil it down to a single value, I would push for temperance. People are so quick to go with a knee-jerk reaction. I think this community would be so well served to just have people slow down and not just like come in swinging to every discussion and take on board what the person you're talking to, what their background is, where they're coming from, before you just like try to punch them out. I think this community could be a really productive place to actually hash out a lot of discussions, rather than moving from shit show to shit show and who's having a meltdown this week and who's blowing up and throwing a hissy fit for seemingly no reason. I'd rather see this community focus on engaging in a conversation about these very heady topics that we're all interested in and we all want to know and we all want to understand better. But I would like to see that. I'd like to see that conversation go somewhere, and I don't think that's going to happen as long as people are just looking for the thing to disagree with.
I just want to point out the Phantom's last thing is "fuck you, Scott, you smarmy." C word. And I hate that word, so I don't want to say it. But welcome to the I'm gonna say it. Welcome to the moderate cunt club. I thought it just applied to Christian moderates like me and Maximus and Saint Tommy and Fiona and all these Christian moderates. But welcome aboard. I know Christopher Mahdi's already been called a moderate cunt. So you're in good company, and there'll just be a club of moderate cunts. So. I said a naughty word. Christians don't judge me. It's in repeating it. Funny stuff. So, thank you. You wanna be, Sci-10 Atheist Phantom Prophet. Have a nice day. And with that, I'm gonna actually close off and say, I do agree with what you just said, by the way, about trying to temper it yourself. And I sound kind of vicious right now, but I'm just a little annoyed, lightly annoyed, not enough. But I wanted to say that I do appreciate you. I feel like oftentimes in conversation you largely are safe to talk to, and and I haven't seen you lose your temper that often, like very rarely. And when you do, you seem to walk it off really well here. So I have always appreciated that about you.
Yeah, I try to keep. I can feel it when I know I'm like losing it, and I don't like to indulge that kind of anger, particularly not against anyone. I'll go punch something for a bit and cool off. And I mean, luckily, I usually don't stay mad long over anything.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's good to get rid of your anger. That's a good thing. So, all right. So I'm gonna end this. You've been a pleasure to talk to as always.
Thank you.
I guess I would say, as usual, aim for kindness in a community. Scott said temperance, which, sometimes I think there's some value in that. And charity is important. Understanding the person's argument. And if you don't understand, go ahead and ask questions. Try to be fair and be charitable. And I think that's huge. And I think it's kind of lacking sometimes. If you want to join us, we're going to have off-air hangout, and even Tom, I'm not going to ban you from an off-air. If you act like a dick, I might throw you out, but conversation's conversation. So I am not that evil that silences people as you speak. I actually will include people. Anyway, I appreciate everybody's viewership and people that participated and actually asked questions or participated in some relevant way to the conversation. I do appreciate that. I'll just like to say, thou beest not a dick. It's a good way to live.